Hello everyone and welcome to the Quickstarter of the Scotch. Here we're going to see many openings from white such as Scotch Gambit, Scotch Game, some other gambits like Belgrade Gambit and also all kinds of four knights, even though officially it doesn't really mean that it's a Scotch, but four knights can be also played with a d4. And of course we have some other variations there. Firstly, there is nothing really which can summarize all of these chapters together, because in one of the variations we could go for some pretty not dangerous but pretty dynamic sharp line. In the other lines we will have slow games. So anything can be different, and we are reaching Scotch position after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6. So yeah, here we are going to get into the Scotch game or Scotch gambit after the d4, ed. So here knight d4 is the Scotch game. There is also Scotch gambit. We'll take a look at it. And after knight d4, we are playing bishop c5. We, of course, consider all kind of moves here for white. And in case of knight c3, so we're going to get into the four knights opening, where we also cover all kinds of moves. The four knights Scotch, which is the most challenging, I would say. All the slow moves like a3, a4, also h3, a3, a4. And also bishop c4, bishop d5. So let's get started. And we're going to start with the Goering Gambit. So this one starts after e4, e5, knight f3, white is attacking our pawn on e5, we're replying with defending it, and white is going for d4. So this is basically the start of the Scotch. From the next move of white, we're going to know what we are having. We're having Gambit, or we'll have Scotch game, and how the game will continue. So we take on d4, and now c3 is played. So this is actually the Goering Gambit. The idea, of course, that we're going to take on c3 and help white to develop the pieces. Obviously, we don't do it, and we don't accept the gambit going for the d5. Pawn takes on d5, queen d5, and we're most likely going to get similar position like from the first Quickstarter with the second move c3. Knight takes on d4 and basically puts no pressure on black, so we continue our development. Knight f6, bishop e3, and now bishop d7. We're already long castle. We don't really have any issues, rather we have already a slight advantage due to our active pieces. In case pawn takes on d4, then we have bishop g4 move, immediately putting pressure on the knight on f3 as well as the pawn on d4. So white has to try to defend in some way. In case of knight c3, it would just be another way to attack our queen. So we play bishop b4, and we will just transpose to the main line. So here we transpose to the bishop e2, bishop b4. We are checking, and after knight c3, we already transpose. Here, very important move, which we have to know, because if we're going just to wait one move after castle, white will not really have any issues, but rather we have to try to stop white's development. And yeah, we want to take on c3, but in a good way. So first we take on f3, which is very important. So now, of course, if white takes with the pawn, they're going to break their pawn structure, so they take with the bishop. And here we have super nice move, queen c4, targeting the knights and also stopping white from castling short. So that's a very, very important move. And looking at the queen on c4, it doesn't look like the best square for the queen, but actually it's working out pretty well. So if white is playing queen b3, trying to challenge our queen for a trade, we have, of course, a couple of choices. First of all, we can try to retake the pawn, but if we do it after bishop takes on c6, pawn takes on castle, we're going to have still king in the center, and we will be down on development. Position will be already objectively lost. So we have to take on b3. Here, white could include intermediate bishop c6 check. We're taking AB, and now seemingly the rook is active on the A file, but we have an A5 move, which is supporting the bishop on B4. And now basically we're going to have a very good position. Our bishop on B4 is going to control the whole queen side. And yeah, both of us have weaknesses, but white has a bit more since D4 pawn is weaker than our A5 pawn. And yeah, we just have round equal endgame. If pawn takes on b3, so white is not taking the knight on c6, trying to keep the bishop here we go knight g7, defending already the knight, so take is not really possible. Bishop is3 trying to develop, but after long castle, short castle, a6 will just transpose. So short castle, long castle, attacking the pawn on d4. Here, in case of d5, if white is pushing forward the pawn, trying to simplify the position, we go knight d4, attacking the bishop and the pawn at the same time. Rook takes our pawn, knight takes f3, we're breaking the pawn structure on the king side. And after a couple of takes, we can see that our pawn structure is not compromised, while white's pawn structure has some weaknesses, and it's going to be definitely at least slightly better endgame for black. So bishop e3, defending the pawn, looks very logical. Here we go a6. So obviously we don't want to give up a pawn, because sometimes we want to jump with a knight away. So yeah, definitely we have a very nice endgame in this position. White has a worse pawn structure, but white has also the bishop pair. So I would say it's around equal, but there is definitely a chance for both of us to fight for advantage. So now we're getting to the also we're getting in this Goering gambit. So here white takes on d5, queen takes, pawn takes, and bishop g4 again, bishop b2, bishop b4, as we all discussed, knight c3. Here very important, bishop takes f3, bishop takes, and queen c4. So here there is another option for white to try to reach the same endgame, but without doubling the pawn. So here bishop c6 can be played. So you can of course also recapture with the pawn on c6, and it would lead to some equal positions. For example, after bc, queen e2. So it would just get into the normal endgame. But if you want to play more ambitious, I offer you to take with a queen. So queen takes on c6. Now white can castle, but we also can finish development playing knight e7 and castle in the next move. In case of queen b3, white is attacking our bishop on b4. We are playing a5. So the main idea, if we just remove the bishop, it would be also fine. But the point of a5 is so that white provokes to play a3. And after white plays a3, later in the game, after bishop takes e3, pawn takes, there is always a problem because, for example, bishop could always be developed to a3, and in this case, this a3 pawn is stepping in the way. So now we go for a4, queen b4, knight d5, attacking the queen, and after rook e1, king on d7, we're going to bring the rook to e8, and king will come to c8 without any problem, and we're also holding all those pawns on the queen side for white. If white goes for d5, more ambitious, trying attacking our pieces, queen d7, going back. But now the pawn on d5 is weakened because it was pushed forward. If queen d4, trying to attack bishop and the pawn on g7, now we're taking on c3, pawn takes, and we're retaking back the pawn. Now queen h4, trying to keep a pressure on the knight. So of course take on g7 was not possible due to rook g8 and checkmate on g2. So queen h4 trying to press on our knight, but here we play f6. We're stopping this idea. Bishop a3 again trying to attack our knight. Now knight a5, knight f5, and after check we can play b5, attacking the queen. Queen c2, and basically here we can already long castle. Even though the pawn on b5 weakens our position of our king, but our queen in the center is defending everything perfectly. It's not so easy to continue also for white to find a way for an attack. Well, we already have the knight also in the position and on the king side, and we can try to attack white's king on the king side. Case of queen b3, which is also attacking the bishop and also putting some pressure on b7. If we would take on c3, of course, queen will not take, but pawn takes. And here, if we want to retake the pawn on d5, after c4, we're getting huge problems because of the bishop a3 coming and rook e1 coming, and our king is staying in the center with a problem. So for that reason, we have to play a5, our typical move, which we are playing after some queen attacking move to our bishop. So now a3. Now bishop takes c3, pawn takes, and queen d5. Now it's completely different story because square on a3 is not available for the bishop. So after c4, we go back with the queen to c6. After rook e1, we have already a very nice streak, because after castle, rook e7, there is just double attack and we're winning material. The Scotch gambit is starting with the d4 takes, and here white goes for bishop c4. Basically, the idea is to just have a use this time which black used to take a pawn for development and already create some kind of ideas. So we go for knight f6. I mean, there is also the way this reach this position from the Italian move order. So after bishop c4, there d4 is played. So castle, we take on e4, knight c3, pretty funny move, because now taking on c3 would be a big problem, since after take, this is something what white is hoping for, to get all this messy position with our king in the center. We cannot allow this. So we take on c3 with the knight, very strong move. Pawn takes on c3, and now bishop e7. We are ready to finish development with castle. White is retaking the pawn on d4, but of course we don't want white to allow white to play d5. So we play d5 ourselves with a tempo on the bishop. Bishop goes away, let's say on b3, and kind of we got a position from the French exchange variation, but somehow there is no pawn on b2 for white. In case bishop goes to b5, we also castle. Now the point is that white wants to take the knight and spoil our structure. Rook e1 was recommended in one of the courses by Jonathan Franz, and here the main point is that c5 is not really possible because of the bishop a3 always coming. So, and we have an issue always on e7. So for that reason, we have a very nice intermediate move, bishop b4, attacking the rook. And there is no really good way. So if rook comes to e2, then we have bishop g4 targeting the knight. In case rook comes to e3, we have immediate c5. And if bishop comes to d2, now we can remove our bishop, but we remove it not to e7, but to d6. And now even if bishop comes back or something happens, c5 is coming the next move, and then we can get rid of our doubled pawn, and we will just have an extra pawn endgame with a clear winning chances. Knight comes to e5, targeting our pawn on c6. Here we go bishop d6, attacking the knight. And yeah, well, of course we could just defend the pawn on c6, but instead we are just gaining our developing advantage in this position. So we're just exchanging the pawn for that. Also, let's not forget we have two bishops. So knight takes on c6, now queen h4, tempo. Now knight has to return back to defend from the checkmate. And after bishop f5, we're just having a lead in the development due to our active pieces. And next moves, something like rook e8, targeting the knight on e5, or rook a to b8 are coming. And even though we already don't have an extra pawn, the position which we have with black is putting a lot of pressure on white. So now we're getting into the, again, Scotch gambit. And here, fifth move, castle, knight e4, rook e1, d5. So not knight c3 variation, but rook e1. So d5, we're defending our knight on e4 and attacking the bishop on c4. Bishop d5, this is a very nice variation from white. The idea is after queen takes on d5, there is knight f3, attacking both queen and the knight. And the point is that neither take is possible. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. So we go for queen a5. This is kind of a main line. But here we have also very nice idea. So if rook takes on e4, it's not really good, because after bishop e6, we're just going to castle long in the next move and just have a great position. In case of knight d4, then we take the knight, queen d4, and now f5. Now we're defending the knight, and white cannot take with a knight from c3 because the rook is going to hang on e1. After knight takes on e4, we are going bishop e6. Obviously, we're blocking the x-ray, potential the discover check. Now after bishop g5, white prevents us from castling long, but we are going for h6, asking bishop where does it want to go. Bishop h4, and now bishop b4. We're developing with a tempo, and we are already ready to, we are kind of pointing out we are ready to castle short. Even though, okay, there are too many pieces of white there, it would be a bit dangerous. In case of rook e2, g5, and we can already castle long, and okay, our pawns on the king side could already start some kind of attack against the king. So c3 after bc, bishop e7, where basically we just have an extra pawn, and now we are ready to long castle at some moment. Okay, we can also short castle, but it looks a little bit more risky. Definitely there is no compensation for the pawn. We can play queen d5 maybe and just long castle. That was bishop g5. In case of bishop d2, developing with the tempo on the queen, and then we're playing queen b5. It's an alternative of the main line, which we will look in a moment. So after queen b5, queen b5 is actually not so commonly played. It's pretty rare move, but it's it's good move. It's supported by the computer analysis. So in case of a4, we take the pawn on b2. It looks risky to take a pawn, but it's actually working out. So rook b1, normal move, attacking our queen and the pawn on b7. Queen a2, rook b7, but here we are having long castle, pretty much shocking move, attacking the rook on b7. After rook comes back to b1, we play h6. We are stopping all kind of bishop g5, knight g5 ideas, and yeah, we are already we're already putting pressure on white, since for white there is a problem. The queen cannot really get out. There is no light squared bishop for white, so we can always return back with the queen. And yeah, our king is pretty safe actually, because there is no threats on the b7 square. If white will play something like queen e2, we have already bishop c4, and we will attack the queen immediately. So the next line is also in the castle variation, d5. Now we're going to move to the main line. So knight e4, bishop e3, and now knight eg5. So now the point is we cannot really defend the pawn. White is going to win the pawn, so we just better finish our development by long castle. And our rook is already on the d file. So knight takes, pawn takes, rook takes, and so far it was the main line of the castle variation, but here we have a very nice move and maybe improvement. So the idea is that the main move in this line is bishop d6, but after bishop d6, very annoying is bishop g4, g5. So here we play queen h5. So our idea is that we want to play bishop d6 still, but we want first to bring the queen to the king side, and so that when bishop g5 is played, our queen is not cut from the queen side, so we cannot really bring it instead of if bishop is there. So now we already have a queen on the king side, and we are ready to play bishop d6. Of course, for example, here bishop f4 would be a huge blunder, since after queen f5 double attack we would win material. Bishop g5 steal, white attacks, and one of the main points of the queen on h5 is also that it's covering the square on e8. So now we are free to move the queen to d5, and it's pretty much actually pretty good square, also coming there with a tempo attacking the bishop. Bishop h4, removing the bishop, now bishop d6, and in the next move we are ready to go for g5, g4, and attack the king. In case of queen e2, here this move is actually played it's pretty popular in online games. In case here we are taking the material after rook g5, we are losing, since after rook e8, knight d8, queen d6, we are getting checkmated. So we have to be careful, and we must play bishop d6. So we stop this ideas of rook e8. Now the threat again is to take on the bishop on g5. h4, the way to defend the bishop, but after h6, there is a problem. Queen e4 attacking our rook on d5, but after rook d5, we're sacrificing an exchange and opening up the h file for our pieces. Now rook queen h1 is already a checkmate threat. King f1, the only move to stop the checkmate, and now after g4, we are targeting the knight g1, going back. Now g3, we are already opening up the position of the king or creating weak squares, and we have a great chances to attack the king, and of course huge compensation for the exchange. So bishop h4, also logical move, just removing the bishop from the attack on g5. Here we go d3, very nice move. So the thing is that now we free the square on d4 for the knight, so potential jumps with the knight on on d4 with the forks are available. So pawn takes. Now g5, we're attacking the bishop, and we want to attack the knight on f3. Bishop g3, and after bishop takes, bishop trade. Now g4, and basically after the knight moves away, we have knight g4 with the fork in the next move, so position is already collapsing for white. So now we are going into the bishop c4, knight f6 into the e5 line, which is more critical and more dangerous. Here we must play d5. That's the way how we react on e5 in the most of the cases. So we are attacking the bishop back. In case white takes our knight, we are happy to trade. And after queen e7, we have queen e2. Sorry, we have bishop e6, and we are just we're just having a very strong pawns in the center. Bishop b5 is pretty much the only move. Now we go knight e7. Very interesting that here knight e4 is the main line, but we are deciding to go for knight e7. Recently, it's becoming more and more popular because it feels like it's easier to play for black in these variations. But okay, it still could be a surprise for the opponent. And even if it's not going to be, then there is another move which should be a surprise. So if white is taking on d4 now, it's a bit too early, because now we can take the knight, queen takes, and play c6, attacking the bishop. Bishop goes back, and after bishop c5, we are almost ready to castle, and queen g4, and we are defending the king side position with a g6, and white was getting some issues with the e5 pawn. Also, our bishop is ready to attack, and knight jumps are also not possible really to stop. So great position for black. We're already clearly better. Okay, so bishop c6. Basically, the idea for white is just to take back the pawn as fast as possible. It's not the way how you're supposed to play Scotch Gambit, but okay, it can happen. So bc. It actually happened, I believe it happened against me in one game. So here white castles c5, we can already defend the pawns, and we can have a strong center. c3, trying to undermine our pawn structure. We take on c3 with the idea after queen d5, we have an intermediate move cb2. Bishop b2 has to take, and after knight b6, we're attacking the queen and also defending the rook and defending the pawn on c5, which with a huge advantage for us. Like, we are having an extra pawn, and we are ready to finish development in just a couple of moves. No compensation for the pawn. If queen takes on d4, then we go bishop e7 after castle, and we're just transposing to the main variation. E6, trying to open up our king position. Pawn takes. Now queen g7, already taking the pawn and attacking our rook on h8. And bishop f6 is defending absolutely everything. Queen g4, and after queen e7, we have very strong central pawns, and we're going to definitely have a big advantage in this middle game. Knight takes on d4. I believe this is how my opponent played in one of the games. Here I took on e5, and I already defend the pawn on c6. The main point is that this line is so much better for black than castle, and because after castle there would be rook e1, but now there is not even rook e1, so it's pretty bad. So here, for example, if white is attacking our knight with bishop f4, we can go queen f6, immediately challenging the bishop g3, and after bishop a6, we even stop white from castling, and meanwhile we're getting ready to castle ourselves. So we don't really have issues here. Queen e2, trying to pin our knight. Of course, the only move is queen e7, because otherwise f5 would come. Now f4. Now f4, and it's winning back the pawn, obviously. So knight g4, knight c6. We are trading the queens, getting into the endgame with the two bishops. So we have a bishop pair advantage. And, well, okay, we have some advantage since we have a pawn in the center, but also our pieces is super active. White has a lot of issues in this endgame they have to solve. After castle, we go bishop d6. So that's the main difference from the main line, is that we are in time to play bishop d6 and defend our knight. In the main line, our bishop is on e7, and we cannot use one more tempo. So now f4 is the only way to stop us from castling. We jump to the knight to g4, and here there is rook e1. But what happens after h3? Well, then we go bishop with the knight back to f6, and after knight c6, bishop c5 check. king h2 and queen d6. And basically we gave back the pawn, but we get so much piece activity and development advantage that the position is already so much better for black. Rook e1 trying to stop us from castling here after king f8. We're not really worried. Our king will stay for a time in the center, but it's absolutely fine because maybe our rook can even just enter the game via the h6 square. Meanwhile, our pieces are super active. Queen h4 could be a threat, bishop c5, and so on. Position is clearly better for black. So this is again the e5 line. Bishop b5, knight d7, and here castle. This is the best white's move because we cannot really take the pawn on e5, and white can continue and finish the development here. We must play some move, and like in previous line, we had opportunity to develop bishop on d6, but now we cannot, so we have to play bishop e7. And rook e1 is a little bit, it's a very common move, but it's not really good. The main idea is to defend the pawn on e5, and white wants to recapture on d4 after taking on c6. So we castle, bishop takes, very logical, takes, and knight d4, attacking our pawn on c6 and supporting the pawn push with the f4, f5. And here we go for a typical move in the structures, which is knight b8. Our knight is going all the way back, but is defending the pawn on c6 and also opening our bishop to stop f4, f5 ideas. So very, very nice move. For example, after f4, we can already kick the knight from the central square by playing c5. Knight would have to go back, and here already we can see f5 is not possible. So now we bring the knight to c6, and after knight c3, d4, we are already having more space advantage in the center, queen d5, and just an excellent position for black in this structure. So if knight goes with the knight, if white goes with the knight on c3, basically not really reacting to c5 threat, we go c5, knight goes away. Now the pawn on d5 is hanging, so we have to play bishop e6. And yeah, basically we're just keeping the position pretty much solid. We have a bishop pair advantage. So far we cannot use it, but maybe later in the endgame we can try. Just good position, slightly better for black, no issues. Queen goes to f3. White is preparing against our move c5. So the point is after c5, white has the knight f5, so the square for the knight on f5. But we are ready for it because we are taking the knight, queen takes, and we go queen d7, offering a trade of the queens. If queens are trade, we're all good. We have a good endgame, and other than that, we can go with the knight of c6 and just continue development. The endgame is going to be around equal. So now we're getting into again the same line, e5. Bishop e7, and now that's kind of the main move. So bishop takes c6, bc, and now knight d4. If queen d4, this is pretty much clear. If queen takes on d4, then it means that white is not sure what to do, like what is going to happen after knight d4. So queen d4 is not so good. So here after castle, knight c3, we go for knight c5, and we are going to put our knight on very nice e6 square and start pushing the pawns in the center. Knight d4, this is the main line, I mean critical lines, we can say. And white is kind of sacrificing the pawn on e5 for some time. We take, it's actually a rare move. The main line is knight b8, just defending the pawn. But here we take on e5, and nothing really, nothing wrong with the main line, but this is a kind of surprise weapon. If we didn't surprise our opponent with knight e7, then at least we would surprise with this move. So now there are 4 ways to attack the knight, but only one of them is good. So if queen goes to e2, we have queen d6, defending the knight and the pawn at the same time. Yes. F4, then we have c5 intermediate move, so pretty much refutes the whole f4 idea. Pawn takes, queen d4, and now c5, getting a nice center, queen d3. And well, we gave back the pawn, not gave up, but gave back the pawn. We still have a bishop pair advantage, e5 is a weak pawn, and yeah, we have strong central pawns. Rook e1 is basically the only way for white to go. Here we go f6. It's a new move, which also leads a lot of attacking lines after f4. So f4, now bishop g4, we have an intermediate attack on the queen. Knight c6 doesn't really work out because after queen d7, knight e5, fe, queen d2, we have castle. And basically the point is that white's king is super weak, and also because of all the pieces on the queen side, white is so much behind in the development. Queen d2 is the better move, definitely. Castle is the key move in this position. So the point is that we're giving up a piece. After take, we have only 2 pawns, but they're central and very strong pawns. But king is pretty much exposed. We always have bishop c5, queen h4, all kinds of ways to attack the king. So let's see, for example, after knight c6, we have bishop c5 check already, king h1, and queen h4. And now we have many ideas, like rook could come to f2, bishop to f2 to g3, and checkmate on h2. So a lot of lines here are possible, and position is already pretty much lost for white. So now we're entering the the same position here. Take, knight d4, knight d5, and here bishop f4. This is actually the correct way to attack the knight with the bishop. So in case of knight g6, attacking the bishop on f4, there is an intermediate knight c6, queen d7, and knight e7, queen e7, queen d4. Basically, it's not really a funny position because we have to castle our king, we have to finish the development, so it's not really working so well. So we have to play c5, and this move is very important because it actually solves all the issues. So we attack the knight on d4. If knight goes to b5, it doesn't really create any issues, so we can go c6, attacking the knight one more time. Bishop b5, we take, bishop takes on g7, rook g8, and after bishop returns back to e5, rook g6, we're just having a big center, we have very nice pawns, the bishop pairs well, and yeah, our king can hide on f8 or g8, like we'll see where our king goes, but for now we are ready to create attack with moves like bishop h3 and so on against the white's king. So if bishop takes on e5, here is cd, queen d4 would be met by c5, immediately kicking back the queen, and now we're ready to castle in the next move, and we're not really having any issues. So bishop g7 immediately, rook g8 again. Bishop takes on d4 would be a bad move because after bishop c3, white is going to lose material. Queen d4 is like better way to to take on d4, but it's also another way to lose an exchange because here after f6, bishop h6, there is again bishop h3. But white's pieces at least are more active in the line. The bishop e5 is the other move. The idea is to stop all kind of attacks against the king with a bishop coming to g3. So here we go c5, defending the pawn on d4. Rook e1, bringing a new piece and also x-raying our king on e8. Queen b6, attacking b2, and also offering an attacking opportunity with queen g6. And yeah, basically the position is a bit complicated, but our pieces are very active. Our king can hide on f8 in case of some problems. And yeah, I mean, we will have an attack against the king. We will have to try to fulfill it. So now we move on from the gambit to the Scotch game. Now knight finally takes on d4. And here we go for the bishop c5, the classical variation, basically immediately asking the question to the knight. Bishop e3 is a traditional main line to develop the bishop to e3. And here we go queen f6, immediately asking question again to the knight. And here again, there are also many moves, but mainly c3. So c3 is defending the knight. So now once we take on d4, the pawn will take and white will have a strong center. In this position, knight g7 is a move, but we're going for the d6 move. It's a bit more tricky. Our idea is that we are not always want to develop knight to g7, but have an opportunity to play queen g6 and develop knight to f6, where it will be on the better square, while we already managed to develop our queen. So for example, after bishop c4, we go knight e5, targeting the bishop, and also g4 square for potential attack on the bishop on e3. After bishop b3, which is remaining on the diagonal, then we play queen g6, attacking the pawn, and after castle, we have already bishop h3 here, actually, and we are winning material. If bishop goes back to e2, again, we have the same move, attacking both e4 and g2 pawns. And after castle, okay, here already this would not really work out so well, but still it's a great move. So bishop h3, bishop f3 is defending, so white is not losing an exchange, but this move is stopping white from pushing f4. So for that we should be happy, because f4 is one of the ideas for white. Knight f6, now that is the cool idea of this queen f6, the whole idea actually of d6, because we played queen g6 and then knight f6. So we managed to develop the knight as a good square. And after king h1, we have to move the bishop back, of course, it was under attack, knight d2. And after h5, we are already preparing I mean, we also keep options, like what do we want to do? We want a short castle, long castle, and other than that, we have many ideas. Okay, bringing the knight to g4 and so on. So definitely clearly a slightly better position for black. If knight d2 immediately, then we can go already with knight h5, threatening to take on f3. Queen will have to retake to defend the pawn and from checkmate on g2, and then bishop g4 would just trap the queen. So yeah, many tricks here from black, and white has to be careful. So again, we're getting into the position of the, yeah, so bishop e3 was played, c3, and now d6 again. So here, if white goes bishop e5, it's already a correct move against this variation. Once white knows what we want to do, of course, it becomes clear that this bishop e5 should be played. Here we must reply with knight g7, and we are ready to short castle. So short castle, and now if white is taking on c6, the point is that if we're taking on c6, we're going to have we cannot really keep. Yeah, we're going to have some problems. Yeah, after knight takes, maybe some doubling of the pawns, and here after bc knight d2, bishop f6. Now idea is to kick actually this knight from d4. So in case of knight c6 here, we take with the pawn on c6, attacking the bishop c5, because of course if white will remove the bishop away, we would take on e3 and just spoil the pawn structure for white. So bishop takes. Now we of course take with a c pawn b5, so that we are not tripling our pawns. And after bishop d4, queen g6, we are ready to strike the center with the f5 pawn. So here knight d2, and now c5, attacking the bishop, and we're just chasing it to the more passive square, bishop e3, and now f5. f4 is a threat already, we don't really have issues. We are ready either to trade the pawns or to push f4 and create attack against the king. So there are many ideas in this position for black, and it's very dangerous for white. f4, white is trying to gain more space in the center, and for example, in case we play bishop queen g6, white would go with f5, so we have to be careful about that. So we play bishop b6. First of all, we're defending from the attack on d4 in case we are taking on d4 with a knight. Pawn takes, and then it would just attack the bishop. So now we go back, king h1, and now d5. Now the idea is to destabilize this pawn so that f5 is not really such a dangerous move later. e5 white still can go for, but here queen h6. Basically the tempo, because now we're threatening to take the pawn on e5, it's not defending by the pawn on f4 because the bishop is going to hang on e3. Queen d2 defending the bishop on e3. Knight d4, now pawn takes, now there is no attack on our bishop, and now we have time to play knight f5, attacking the bishop, attacking the pawn, and we are ready to break this pawn center with f6 move, and yeah, definitely a big counterattack for black. Now we're moving on into the knight b3 variations. It's recently has been white's most dangerous approach against the bishop c5. Here we have to go on b6 and queen e2. This move order is a bit tricky. So here, okay, there are a few moves for white: knight c3, a4, and queen e2. And okay, queen e2 is a bit more tricky. So the point here is we don't know yet how we're going to continue our game. Do we need the queen on f6 or not? So we played d6, which is a flexible move. Now we are flexible if we want to go with the queen f6, knight g7, or we develop the knight without developing the queen. So for example, after bishop e3, we can already play queen f6. Yeah, it's already coming with a tempo. Knight c3 and knight g7. It's just going to transpose to the other variation. So now knight c3, again, here we go for a5, very important move. We want to threaten to attack the knight on b3. And the point is also that with the knight coming to c3, there is already a threat to jump to d4 after our queen is coming to f6. So here a5. A4 is a very logical move, but after knight b5, first of all, we gained a super nice square on b4, which is very good to occupy with the knight after knight move to c3, so that there is no c3 move. And also we're targeting c2 and stopping white from jumping with a knight to d5. So bishop e3 is the main try, because in this position, bishop e3 is already not possible, since after bishop takes, there is going to be a problem with c2 square. So here bishop e3 has to be tried, but that's why we played a5, not to just take on e3, but go forward with a4. This was our main move, main idea, to take on b3, to kick the knight from b3. If bishop takes on b6, we take on b3, bishop e3, and now we take on a2. And after some simplifications, we're just getting into the pretty normal positions without any issues. Okay, white has a bishop pair advantage, but we are fully ready to finish the development and push for d5. Knight goes back to d2. Now we take on e3, queen takes, and now a3. This is very important move, because if we're not going for a3, white will play a3 at some moment. So here a3. b3 is very logical, trying to close the position. Now knight f6, bishop b5, castle, bishop takes on c6. In case of short castle, it would allow knight to b4, because after rook f to c1, there is queen e7, and yeah, the knight on b4 is pretty annoying piece. So bishop, that's why, takes on c6, pawn takes, and we're just going to try slowly put pressure on e4 pawn. At some moment, we will see if there's like any d5 break possible, just preparing for this break. And yeah, also at some moment, bishop f5 to attack the pawn would be possible in case white goes for something like f3 and weakens the queen on e3. So that was one of the variations. So now we move again to this knight b3. We go back with the bishop to b6, and now knight c3. It's the most popular move so far. And in this position, we have a very nice intermediate move, queen f6. So here we don't have to start in flexible way, because queen f3 is already a checkmate threat. So queen e2 has to be played, and now we go knight g7, stopping the knight jump to the d5 square, which is very important to stop it. So we stop it either with knight b4, or we stop it with knight g7. But of course, it's better to stop it once we develop the queen to f6. So here, bishop e3, offering a trade. It's pretty important to offer a trade at this moment, because if it's not played, then we already will be able to go for a5 and knight b4. d6, we are ready to finish the development, and long castle, bishop d7, and the point is, again, we would like to develop bishop on e6, but on e6 there is going to be an issue on d5. White, once knight is jumping, after knight takes, pawn takes, we will get a fork, so we don't need that. That's why bishop e7. f4, white is trying to get a very nice center, but after bishop g4, with a super nice trick, queen takes, bishop e3, being f1, we are just winning a pawn and having great position and winning chances. f3, white is trying to be very solid, but here we go for long castle, queen d2, and now bishop e3, we're kind of winning time because queen moved away, and now queen has to take, queen d2, bishop takes, queen takes, and now queen g6 with the idea of pushing for f5 to challenge the white center, and we already don't really have issues, and we can say we equalized, or maybe even more potentially if we could have some ideas for an attack. So another variation of knight b3. Here a4, white is pushing for a4, already creating a threat of a5. Of course, we are not allowing it, we're playing a5 ourselves. knight c3, and now knight c3 is on the board. So the knight d4 is a threat, knight d5 is a threat. So we go knight b4, covering the d4 square, and also now kind of the bishop e3 move is going to be very difficult to execute because we're controlling c2 square. So bishop c4, the main idea that now since this bishop e3 move order with a queen on e2 is not really working out because of the pawn on c2. Now white is going for, instead of long castle, for the short castle. So bishop c4. Now d6, our idea, of course, that we are holding the e5 square. We can develop the queen all the way to h4 pretty dangerously for white, and place the knight on f6. This is very, very important because if we place immediately knight to f6, we would not have this opportunity. So d6 is a very flexible move now, and we'll see how white will continue. So for example, after castle, okay, now queen h4 doesn't really make so much sense. Then we play knight f6. If h3 is played, we go h6 ourselves to stop bishop g5 moves. Rook e1, castle, bishop e3, we trade the bishops. So now white trades the bishops, but with different idea, with the rook on e1. Bishop takes, rook takes, and bishop e6, we just get an equal position, equal game. Maybe we can say white has slightly more advantage due to the pawn in the center, more space in the center, but we are ready to challenge the pawn later. So we will see. Of course, d5 is very difficult, but maybe at some moment we can go for the f5 push. So bishop g5, white is using the time and pins our knight. So h6, normally always we want to challenge the bishop and see where does it want to go. So usually the bishop is standing on h4, and here already we have an opportunity to go for g5 since our king hasn't yet castled. So bishop goes to g3, and now we go h5, full attacking mode against the king. So h3, now h4, bishop goes back, and g4. The idea is to push for g3 or take on h3, and the attack has started. Our king can be on f8 later, so that it's not on the semi-open file. And we can continue the attack, already slightly better position for black here. So now we're going again to this position with bishop c5. Here we are going to discuss the knight c6 variation. So white is jumping with the knight 1, 2, 3 times, taking our knight. We take with the b pawn. It could be already a surprise because actually here the main line is queen f6 with the threat on f2. So bc should be already some kind of a surprising move. And okay, the point here is that also we have the idea of go with the queen to h4, attacking the pawn on f2. So white has to try to handle it in some way. But if white is not handling it, for example, if knight c3 is played, then knight is already defending the pawn on e4, and this queen h4 would not really bring so much power. But in case of bishop c4, then queen h4 with attack on f2 and the pawn on e4 is coming very nicely. Queen f3, trying to defend both of the squares. And here we go d5 immediately, using the fact that the bishop is standing there. Even though it feels like white is stopping d5, d5 is coming with a huge power. Bishop is coming to g4 and so on. So bishop goes back to d3. White couldn't really retake with a pawn. Now we go knight f6, putting pressure on this pawn. The bishop g4 is also coming. Many ideas. So ed, now knight g4 already, because white didn't castle. So now we can put pressure on f2 with all our pieces. And after g3, we have queen e7 check, attacking the king. And basically we have a great compensation in this position due to all our pieces activity. And it's a bit tough to find a way for white to defend the position of the king. In case of the castle, this is pretty much the most common move, defending on f2 by castling. We're going knight f6, threatening to take on e4. Of course, taking with the queen on e4 would be not possible due to the bishop rook e1. But now, after knight f6, we have threats to take on e4 and to jump on the g4 square, targeting very weak h2 and f2 squares. So knight c3, it's actually pretty bad because knight is defending the pawn on e4, but it's not doing anything against the attack on the king side. So now knight g4 is incoming, targeting both squares. h3, now knight already can take on f2 without issue. In case of bishop f4, Here we take on f2, but it's very important to remember this variation, because after bishop f7, we have to know the only winning move, which is king d8. In case we take the bishop after bishop g3, we are getting an issue since our knight is pinned to f7, f2, so the knight cannot jump away with a check, and we are going to lose. I mean, not really lose, but get worse position. So king d8 must be played, removing the king, and now already all kinds of jumps are possible in the position. So queen h5, white has nothing really better than getting into the worst endgame, so we trade the queens. Knight d3, king h1, just trading and getting the bishop pair. Rook b8, putting pressure. We have a bishop pair. We have, yeah, there is a weakness only for the isolated pawn. So definitely clearly better endgame for black. So now we're moving to this knight c6, bc, bishop d3. So this is the right approach. White is developing the bishop, at the same time defending on e4 and ready to castle. So now queen h4, again, we're attacking everywhere, but after castle, we go knight f6 with the same idea of jumping with knight to e4 or g4. So now h3. The point is white is preventing the knight g4 idea, but here we go d6 already, targeting the pawn. So now, even though the h3 is stopping, it's a prophylactical move and stopping knight coming to g4, h3 became itself a target for our bishop. For example, if white is not careful and playing knight d2, it's immediately losing, since after bishop h3, in case knight f3, we are going to win after queen g3. Very interesting how everything is so pinned. And after gh, we have queen g3, queen h3, and now knight is coming to g4. Knight f3 trying to stop the checkmate, but after queen g3 and bishop f2, checkmate is unavoidable. So that was it. So queen f3, trying to defend everything, and also h3. So now we go knight d7. We want to remaneuver our knight to e5. Bishop e3, knight e5, attacking the queen, the bishop. Now queen e2, bishop e3, we got to trade the queens. g5. We also won the time with the knight jumping to e5. That's very important. So now g5. We have already ideas to bring the rook to g8 and push for the g4. And also the queen f4 could be an idea as well. We're very comfortable. Yeah, very good position and prospects for an attack against the king. Queen f3 played immediately, then we're going for bishop d4. So the point of queen d3 is that bishop f4 is actually a threat right now, and also e5 at the same time. So we have to stop those two threats together, and bishop d4 is a perfect move, which is doing it, because after bishop d4, we are first of all targeting the b2 square, so bishop cannot move, and we are also controlling the e5 square. In case of c3, it's very important that we don't go bishop e5, since after g3, queen h3, knight d2, knight c4 is going to come in the next move, and we will have issues with our knight on e5, bishop on e5. So knight g4 has to be found to first create a threat on h2. It's a checkmate threat. In case of h3, it would give just a target for white, for black. So after knight e5, queen e2, bishop b6, bishop b3, g5. Again, we are having this hook which we can attack. And in case of bishop f4, here we can go knight e5. So we want to trade some pieces, now attacking the queen. Queen goes to e2, knight d3, queen d3. Now bishop goes back to b6. Also, we're targeting the pawn on f4. Let's not forget about it. And we managed to get the bishop pair and pretty solid position in this opening. So now we're going into the 4 knights territory, which I already said is not really the Scotch territory, but of course, if white is going for d4, it's a Scotch territory for sure. So here we take on d4, knight d4. So the main point, and it's pretty much a challenging opening for against black, so we have to be really careful here. So the main point is that white is getting a domination in the center with having a pawn in the center, the e4 pawn, and the piece is already also in the center. But we are going for attacking it with a bishop c5, similar to the other line. The point here is that bishop b4 is actually the main line, but we're playing bishop c5, which maybe for some people will not be understandable at first, but there are ideas behind this move. So first of all, we are attacking the knight, so something has to be done. And well, of course, bishop e3 feels like the most natural move, but let's see what happens if, let's say, knight comes to b3. It's not really bad move, but it's not challenging. So we have bishop b4 now. Now we can compare this position to the position with the knight on d4. Definitely it's an improvement that knight is on b3 now, instead of the main line where bishop comes to b4 immediately. So here bishop d3, defending the pawn on e4, and after a5, a4, d5, we're breaking the center. Considering the fact that knight from d4 would always be threatening to take our knight on c6, so now it's definitely an improvement. Knight takes on c6 immediately, which is one of the main lines. Now we take with a b pawn. We don't want to trade the queens. So in case of e5 attacking our knight, we are going for queen e7, pinning the pawn. And after queen e2, we can go already knight d5. So it would be pretty comfortable position. So bishop d3, trying to defend everything, putting and also ready for castle with the king. So castle, castle, and now rook e8, attacking the pawn. The idea is also to bring the bishop to d4 to attack the knight on c3 and create some stress, put pressure on the e4 pawn. In case of rook e1, we can already go forward with d5 just to break the center. After e5, which would close the position, we have a nice move knight g4 and pretty much introducing the queen h4 with the weak h4 and f2. Black would already be winning. So white has to try to take if they want to go for this line, but now bishop g4, we have an intermediate move attacking the queen. We're developing with the tempo, rook e8, queen e8, queen f1. But here after cd, the position is around equal, but looking at the white's pieces, it feels like that the queen is a bit strange and we have more activity. So definitely black has chances to fight. Bishop g5 is the most annoying move because it's pinning our knight. It's not allowing us to go for the d5 so fast. So first, we always ask a question, h6. Where do you want to go? So normally bishop goes to h4 most of the times. Here we go bishop d4. The idea is putting pressure on the knight. Knight cannot also jump. We're putting pressure on b2 square and defend the knight on f6. If queen f3, it would not really be so much basically a threat of taking because we are defending very well. But it's rather going to be a blunder because after g5, bishop g3, d5, and we are threatening to win the queen here on f3 because after bishop g4, there will be no squares for the queen and we should win. I would say at least we should win a pawn, but maybe the queen also possible. King h1, this is the most challenging move because it's immediately introducing the f4 idea in the position. We go g5, attacking the bishop and also stopping f4. Here, bishop g3, we take on c3, pawn takes, knight e4, and white goes for queen h5. It looks like the position is dangerous because of all these pieces and also the bishop on d3, but we have queen f6 move, which is holding together. In case of rook a to e1, then we have d5, and we're just there is not even attack for white. But if white is playing f4, trying to open up the position, here we go knight. I mean, here we have also move queen g6, which would already offer a trade, and after a trade of the queens, it would just have an equal game. But we also have knight g3, pawn takes, and here the key move, the key idea of defending the f7 square is rook e7. So that now after g5, pawn takes on g5, we could take on g5 as a queen, and f7 would be defended. Again, we are having around equal positions, and we are for now up a pawn. That could be something later in the endgame, but definitely around equal position because white is currently the one who is attacking. So now we go again to this position of the 4 knights, d4, bishop c5. So here we're coming to the basically main and most challenging way to act on this bishop c5 by playing bishop e3 with a threat of knight taking on c6. Here, in comparison to the Scotch game, we cannot play queen f6 anymore. The knight is standing on f6. So now we have to come up with another move. And the whole idea of the bishop c5 is in the next move after e3, after bishop e3, to play bishop b4 and spend one more tempo. This might look a little bit crazy, but it's actually actually has its own idea. So first of all, okay, once you're looking, it feels like we just gave a template for white to develop the bishop to e3. But in some lines, bishop e3 could be actually annoying for white themselves, since it's going to block a defense of the e4 pawn, for example, from the rook to e1, from e1. And the other lines, we might have knight g4, which comes with a tempo on the bishop. And in the other variations, once we push for d4, d5, after takes and knight takes, we're going to attack the bishop, which is on e3. So it's we can debate if the bishop on e3 is standing better than the bishop on c3, c1, but according to our analysis, we made that work. So bishop d3 is pretty decent move. We just continue the development. Now knight d4 is actually a new move already. The idea is just to create an imbalanced position now. Since after bishop d4, we want to go for c5. And threat is that once the bishop goes away, we want to take on c3. If bishop takes on f6, then we take with a queen d2, defending the knight. And here we managed to spoil the structure for white. Castle, now d6, and we're just absolutely not having any problems, while white has some weak queen side. Okay, so bishop b5, then we are having queen a7, attacking the bishop and also putting some pressure on the e4 pawn. Bishop f4, now c4, attacking the bishop. Is just, I mean, the main idea is after bishop c4 that we can take the pawn on e4, since this is knight is pinned, and after queen e2, short castle, we just have a very nice position, some pretty good chances in this position, middle game. Bishop comes back to e3, so it's kind of allow us already execute our idea, but our main move was to go for the d5. We are threatening to go for d4, so white has to do something about this pawn. Cannot really castle now. If white is going for e5, it would be a very ambitious idea because attacking our knight on f6. But here we go knight g4, attacking the bishop, attacking the pawn on e5. And again, this still is threat with d5. So bishop b5 giving us a check. We move away with the king. Now bishop d2, white is trying to break the pin, and just we can already return the material. So we go for d4, knight e4, trade of the bishops, and here we are playing queen d5. We are going to regain the e5 pawn eventually, and our rook can be placed via the via the 6th rank. So we do not necessarily have to play g6 and bring the bishop here, bring the king to g7, but we can also bring the rook out of from the 6th rank. So yeah, definitely a good position, and we have slight advantage due to our pawns and more space in the center. In case pawn takes on d5, then we castle. Since after bishop c4, when white is trying to keep the material, we go bishop g4 with attack on the queen d3, and now a6. Now we threaten to go b5 and c4. If white is stopping us by playing a4, we can play b4 anyway, since after takes, trade on a8. The problem is a1 square and win of the rook on h1. So castle, white is trying to finish the development, not caring about the pawns. Bishop takes, and queen takes on d5. We're getting position where white has bishop pair, there is open center, but meanwhile white also has a weak queen side. If we're going to manage to trade the bishop, the light squared bishop, we're going to have decent position. So the most important just to make sure that we're not letting those two bishops to attack, but other than that, position looks pretty balanced and both sides have chances for an attack. The next position is again the queen, then the 4 knights Scotch. Knight takes, bishop c5, bishop c3, and now bishop b4. Knight c6 is pretty much similar to the bishop b4 immediate, is one of the main moves, and after bc, Bishop d3. This is the most common move, but okay, there is a better move for white in this position. We will look at it a bit later. So d6, we are ready to create a threat of knight jumping to g4. Castle, now knight g4, bishop has to move. So with that, in that way, we kind of won back that the tempo, so bishop has to move. If bishop goes to d2, we have a queen h4, and we will transpose, because in case of queen f4, in case of bishop f4, we have queen f6, and we are going to transpose. If white is playing h3 here, we are going back with the knight to e5, bringing it to the nice square, attacking the bishop, and ready to finish our development and start attack against the king, while there could be some ideas of attack. So bishop f4, now we transpose this position, queen f6, targeting both the bishop and the knight. In case of knight e2, which would defend the bishop and remove the knight, we are having bishop c5, bringing the bishop to this diagonal, putting pressure on f2, and we are ready to take on f2 and create a threat of pushing for g5 and winning the material for black. Bishop goes to g3, trying to defend everything here after h5. H4 is a big threat, and if white is playing something like h3, it would be already a weakening of the position. Queen d2, trying to defend both pieces, but after castle, rook a1, we have knight e5 with a brilliant position for the knight. We are ready to, basically we are ready to bring our rook to b8. We could remove the bishop to a5, so that the bishop is attacking the pawn on b2. Also, the idea of bringing the knight to c4 by placing the bishop to e6. So definitely many ideas in this position for black, and our game is pretty comfortable. So now we're getting to this position. Knight c6, bishop pawn takes c6, and now queen d4 is basically the move which is a critical test for the bishop c5, bishop b4 variation. White is bringing the queen out to the game, attacking our bishop on b4 and ready to long castle. We play queen e7, targeting the e4 pawn and defending our bishop on b4. If white goes for e5 here, it's just not really going to create any problems for us, since we have c5. Of course, if white would take on f6, we would take here, and there would be some issues. So queen f4, knight d5. Now we're attacking both the queen and the knight. Queen e4, and after c6, already we are the one who is playing for an advantage, because white lost enormous amount of time with the queen. In case of f3, we have d5 immediate, just using this fact that there are a few pins in the position. After long castle, we go for short castle. Here, if we take on c3 and try to take a pawn on e4, after bishop c5, we are having issues with the finishing the development, and rook e1 is coming, so we are lost. That's why we have to be very careful, and first castle. Taking the pawn on e4 is not possible yet. So e5, now white doesn't want to give up a pawn. Bishop takes on c3, now we can jump with a knight to d5 with an attack. And after queen d4, we take on e3. We're getting back the bishop pair, removing the bishop pair from white. And after rook e8, putting pressure on the pawn on e5. After f4, we already have d5, and yeah, the only move which is left to play is breaking the center with f6, and we're doing well. Bishop g5, the two grandmasters who reached this position with white continued with this move, and pretty much normal. Now we go rook e8. Again, we are stopping any e5 ideas, putting pressure on e4. In case of f3, which is slowly developing a move, but it has some problems since after bishop c3. In case white takes with a pawn, we have queen a3, king d1, king d2, and c5, and we are already creating an attack against the white's king. And yeah, we're just going to continue with rook e6, rook d6, and yeah, basically some issues for white definitely to hold. If queen takes on c3, then we take on e4 with a knight, since after bishop takes e7, we take on c3, and we're just going to have an extra pawn in the endgame. So this move doesn't really work. White has to do something about the bishop on g5. Bishop takes the knight. That's a surprising to take immediately, not waiting. But okay, there was no real other move because there were threats in the position with bishop c3. So we take with a pawn. The problem is we cannot take with a queen. We would love to, but our bishop needs protection on b4. Rook d3, the idea is to bring rook to g3, so we immediately stop it by removing the bishop from d6, from before, sorry, bishop is not needed on before, there is no pin any longer. So now we play bishop d6 and stopping the rook coming to g3. We have a position where we have a bishop pair advantage and a b file openness for the rook for potential attack on the king, so that's a good position. Bishop c4 trying to develop, and here we have queen c5. Very nice idea. Attacking the queen, attacking the bishop. So now queen cannot take on f6. So queen goes to d3. Now rook b8, bringing the rook to the semi-open file to target the king's position. And after h4, we go queen e5. Now we already have threats, first of all, to take on c3. And secondly, we stop the queen coming to g3 with the check. That was the four knights, this bishop e3 variation, this bishop c5, a very interesting one. Now we're going to go into the position of four knights again, and after d4 take, here white wants to play a gambit, let's say, and they play for knight d5. This is called the Belgrade gambit, and you should really take it pretty carefully, I would say. I mean, it's not something which is super good for white, but it's not a dubious opening. So that for that reason, we have to be really careful. And once we equalize everything, we're just good. So we go for bishop e7. Yeah, and basically our main point is that we want to just continue normally. We don't want to take on e4. We don't want to create any kind of mess. We just continue our development. That's the best way to react against the gambit, not to go for it. So knight takes on d4. Now, basically, it's not really causing any problems. White takes a pawn so quickly back. So we take the knight on d4. Trade happens. Now knight d4, queen d4. And after castle, we're ready to play bishop f6. And yeah, we have a lead in the development. We will be playing rook e8, trying to attack the king, and so on. So no real issues for black. Bishop f4. Now already there is a big threat of taking on c7, so we have to react. We play d6, stopping it. Now knight d4 here, if in castle is also a move which we can play to be ambitious, but knight d5 is just also a perfect way to continue. Knight d5, pawn takes, knight d4, and bishop f6. We're having a very good position, and yeah, we're ready to castle long, castle short, sorry, and yeah, just continue the game. Both sides have two bishops. Bishop c4, also again developing and controlling the d5 square, potentially some pressure on the f7 square, and generally bishop is good on c4. So we castle, and we take on e4. Now we can go for it. d6 is actually the more common move, but since we already castle, we could already take the pawn on e4. So knight takes on d4. Now knight f6, we are going back and offering trade. So we won a pawn, and now we're offering trade. Knight e7, bishop g5, trying to create some ideas because we will have to spoil our pawn structure. Now knight g6, and basically we can break the pin with playing h6, and the bishop will not be able to go for the h4 square. So rook e1 feels like a logical move, putting pressure on the e file. Now we go back with knight to f6. The bishop is defended. In case of knight d4, we are just going to trade pieces and just having an extra pawn without any compensation. If rook comes to e7, this is very interesting idea, but it's simply not enough for white. The point is after rook takes, knight takes, white has a knight f6 move. We are taking on f6, and after bishop h6, d5, basically we're stopping attack. There is no attack. Our knight is ready to come to g6, and yeah, just yeah, nothing really which is so dangerous. So knight e7 is the main move. Now we take with the knight. If bishop g5, again we have d5 move, and yeah, just immediately targeting the bishop, and after that it's not really a scary line. Bishop takes f6, pawn takes. Now bishop goes back to d3, and after bishop g4, we're just up 2 pawns. Okay, they're a bit doubled, but it's not a problem. We're also pinning the knight, and yeah, it's not really visible how white will start attacking ours on the king side. So queen takes d4. White brings the queen to the position. Now we have d6, trying to continue with the developing bishop g4 move. Bishop g5, white is putting pressure now on knight on f6. And now we go knight f5, challenging the queen, also removing the square on h4 for the bishop, so that h4 is possible. Queen f4, now h6, bishop takes, queen takes, and g4. And basically, if we are removing the knight here, then white is going to spoil our pawn structure. So we go for g5, intermediate move, attacking the queen. Queen comes to e4. If we are going to play here knight g7 after bishop d3, we can already resign. So we have to play d5 here, and very, very important to know this move. So this line is full of intermediate moves, but it's actually working out, and pretty long line, but it's good to remember and know it so that you understand how you continue, and then you just have an extra pawn at the end and without real compensation. Now we are moving again to the 4 knights, but now we're moving to the Italian 4 knights. Yeah, so the main point is that bishop is coming to c4, but very strange that so many games are played and they are allowing the knight e4, typical trick from the Italian game, and okay, apparently also from this line as well. So we are, of course, taking the pawn. If bishop takes on f7, it's a pretty bad move. White is trying to achieve something, but after king takes d5, we're just gaining a center, and yeah, we don't really have any issues here. I mean, just leading the development, bishop here and the center. So the next one is castle. Here white is kind of sacrificing a pawn for a quick development. After knight c3, dc, we can play h6, and we're just keeping material advantage. But okay, if you don't want, you can also play here bishop e7, and after queen d5, you will just give back the e5 pawn and have also a round equal position. Knight takes on e4, then we have d5. That's a typical trick. If bishop takes on d5, queen d5, and we also have bishop pair and center, and everything is good. If bishop comes to b5, we take on e4, knight e5. Looks like white is attacking us on c6 and with a bishop, but here we have queen g5, and kind of everything is hanging now. After knight c6, we can take with the queen to b5, and after knight d5, we can go back with queen g5 and putting pressure. So these are the possible lines. The bishop goes to d3, now we take on e4. Bishop takes on e4, and we're getting similar position to the Scotch 4 knights with the d4 move. And here after bishop d6, if bishop takes on c6, we're just, okay, the structure is going to be not good for us, but we're having good position, we're pinning the knight. We can also threaten later to take on f3 with playing something like queen f6, targeting the knight on f3. And yeah, generally it's pretty difficult to break the pin for white. And we have a bishop pair, let's not forget about that. Besides advantage in the center. White is going for castle. Now, if white is playing h3, stopping our bishop g4 idea, we shouldn't be too worried, because here we go knight b4 now. f5 would be already an idea, but we want to play f5 so that white doesn't really have bishop d5 option. c3 trying to attack our knight, and now we go for f5. Now bishop has to go in the very passive square on b1, and after knight c6 returning back, and we're just having very good positions with the central pawns very nicely covered. d3, white is not really challenging the center. We go for bishop g4, again pinning this knight, h3, and then bishop h4, keeping the pin. We are slightly better, and we have to go for f5 later. So rook e1, basically stopping our f5 ideas by putting pressure on the e5 pawn. So here we go bishop g4. Now again we are introducing f5 because knight is going to be pinned. h3, bishop h5, and now g4 is basically the only way to stop f5. We go bishop g6, bishop takes on c6, doubling our pawns, and knight e5. White has won the pawn, but in return, the queen side has weakened. So queen h4 we have already in these positions, and now f5 is coming pretty much on every move. White has real issues. So now we're continuing. Again, we have 4 knights. Now h3 move. So there are there are kind of different moves, slow moves, which can be played in this position, such as a3, and a4. It's important to know how to react on each of one. So if white is playing h3 and if white is playing a3, sorry. If white is playing a3 and a4, then we cannot really continue with d5 because it's going to transpose to the reversed 4-9. So basically, we're going to play as white, but white will have a slight advantage because in some lines, f3 h3 square would stop ideas of bishop coming to g4, sorry. And in some lines with a4, it's going to bring more space for white with a4 move. But if white is coming and playing a3 move, then we can go for it. So if a3 is played, then we can go for d5 because there is not much of a difference to the main line. So a3 is not such an improving move, but h3 is an improving move. So here we cannot really go for d5. So we go bishop b4. This is what we play against a4 and h3. This bishop b4, we are going for it. So kind of we are going for the Spanish for knights reversed. Knight d5 leads to pretty much equal positions since after take e4. If queen goes to e2, we just short castle, and if dc happens, we take the knight. So queen f3, we take with the d pawn, bishop c4, castle, and bishop g5. We get very equal positions with both chances for the both sides. cb, bishop b7, gf, and after castle, white is pretty much worse already here. So cd, this is not so good, and here white would be rather okay with the equalities after bishop d7, queen f3, now castle, bishop e2, and rook e8, putting pressure on the e file. Castle, white only needs a couple of moves to consolidate, but they are not in time because we have bishop c6 immediately challenging the queen. Queen d3 is the main move, but in case of queen comes to g4, we have rook e4 again attacking the queen, and white is having really troubles to consolidate, that's for sure. Queen f3, now rook queen e8, and there are many ideas. We already threatened to take the bishop, and our rook can jump anywhere. Position is kind of lost. If white is playing queen b3 with the idea of attacking the bishop, here we take on e2, trading the bishops, and after queen d5, already threatening to checkmate. After f3, rook a to e8, and yeah, huge attack against the white's king, and very difficult position for white. So if queen d3, white is trying to guard the bishop on e2, but yeah, it's blocking the development of the bishop on c1. So after queen f6, we're not even allowing the bishop to get developed to b2, and since we have such a huge lead in the development, the position is clearly better. We are ready to bring the other rook to d8, and white is just collapsing here. So now we're going to go to this a3 move. So again, as I was discussing earlier with you, if a3 is played here, d5 works already because it's not such an improvement in comparison to the h3 move. So here, if pawn takes on d5, knight d5, bishop b5, pretty much playing like black. Now we take on c3, bc, bishop d6, and castle. So we're kind of transposing to the same position, but with white pieces. So d4, e4, and bishop g4. Pretty safe way for us to go. Comfortable play. Bishop b5 immediately. This is a pretty sharp line. Here we are going for knight e4. And yeah, knight e5 is not really working. So if here queen e2, then we have queen d6. But if white is going for knight e5, it's pretty critical, of course, but it's bad. Because here we have queen g5 attacking the knight and the pawn on g2. It's pretty typical idea. In this case, okay, it's not attacking both of the pieces, but it's attacking the knight on e5. So if knight takes on c6, we take on g2, and after rook f1, a6, attacking the bishop, and after bishop a4, we take on c3, and after a couple of checks, we play bishop d7. This is a key idea, to attack the bishop, take the defender of the bishop, and play bishop d7, and we're just winning here. So knight takes on d5, we're taking on b5, knight c7, king d7, knight a8, white is taking our queen, our rook, sorry, but after king c6, we are ready to develop with our bishops, take the knight on a8 and have great positions. But white can try to create some ideas. Okay, d3 is not really the way to do so, because after bishop b4 f3, knight d3, and we are already crushing with bishop b4. Checkmate is incoming. If d4 is played, then we're going for bishop e6. Basically, we want to attack the position of white from the c4 square, attacking the rook. b3 trying to stop it, this idea, bishop e7. Now already we are ready to take the knight on a8. And yeah, we're just having a good position up material after taking the knight. Queen e2, trying to defend everything and trying to be active. It's the best move, because white will also have some counterattack with the a4 move. Bishop z5, we are preparing to bring the rook to the game and also develop the other bishop from c8. d4, white is attacking our bishop, and here very important is not to take the pawn on d4, since after bishop takes, there is an a4 move immediately counterattacking on b5. After we take rook a4, and actually now we are losing, because suddenly white's pieces are getting activated. The rook and the queen and the knight are going to checkmate our king. So that's why we play here bishop e6. The threat is bishop to c4. So now after f3, we're trading the queens, bishop c4, king e1, we take a few pieces, and at the end of the line, we're getting a very nice endgame. We have an interesting pawn structure, but okay, we will most likely be able to win some weak pawns from white, and at least we're clearly better here. So now a4, trying to, again, open up the position. So for that reason, if we're going for bishop c4 here, then there is an intermediate move, take on b5, and after bishop takes, there is an intermediate d5, so we are actually crushed. So we have to first play bishop b4 check, first ask white to go for c3, and after knight c3, we're also defending the pawn on b5, so white cannot really do much, because it will be always a check after knight is jumping, and after white recaptures the knight, we're taking with the bishop, creating a fork, attacking the king and the rook, and after bishop d2, bishop c4 is finally working in this position, since after cb, bishop b5, now d5 would not really work, because our queen can take on d5. There is no knight standing on e4. And after queen takes on b5, king takes, bishop c3, now king c6, we're just defending the pawn. We're ready to go for the b5 and capture the knight on a8, having better material advantage, and also king is still in the center. So now we're continuing to the 4 knights but Spanish variation with the bishop to b5. We're going bishop d6 here. It's a pretty interesting move. It's not the main line. It feels like an awkward way to go. The main line is knight d4. But bishop d6 is more fighting move, more ambitious one. And for that reason, we are going for it in this variation. It feels like the square is very bad for the bishop. And generally, we know that, okay, we want to play at some moment d6 or d5 and develop our other bishops, so bishop is standing in the way. But the main point of this move is to defend the pawn on e5, and after we're going to finish the development on the king side, we're going to remaneuver our pieces, and bishop is going to be playing better. So here in case of bishop c6, it's not really good for white, because they're just helping us, since our bishop was closing the bishop from c8, but now after take, the bishop is just opening, so d4, bishop b4, it's just very important to remember this move. We are putting pressure on e4 and d4 at the same time. Castle, ed4, knight d4, and after bishop c3, we're spoiling the position of white's pawns. And after c5, basically we're getting around equal positions, and pretty more pleasant due to the more weak pawns on the queen side for white. After d4 immediate, pretty also a logical move, because her bishop is standing on d6 and white is just helping us to open up it. So after take knight d4, trade happens, queen e7, now our bishop is ready to go to c5, d5, and again, we don't really have any issues. Castle, we castle as well, and now d3. White wants to go for the bishop g5, so we're stopping it. We're playing h6. Bishop comes to e3, now we bring the rook to e8, and we're going to fulfill our typical setup, bring in the bishop to f8 and push for the pawn to d5. So after a3 is played, we go bishop f8, bishop c4. The main idea is to stop pawn to coming to d5. So we cannot go for d5, we play d6 now. And after h3, which is very useful move because, okay, knight d4 not a move anymore, we play bishop e6 and offer a trade for the bishop as well as preparing the d5 idea. After bishop takes, we have to be really careful and understand how we're taking. If we want, of course, generally more ambitious is to take with the rook, but sometimes we are not in time. And there is such a rule. So if we see that the knight can easily come to d5 and white could follow up with like c4, d4, immediately strike in the center, like in this case, then we must take with a pawn. Then we shouldn't allow this to happen. This move is normal. It's more solid move. But of course, generally, if we have a chance, if knight is, for example, not on c3, and we can see that white cannot really organize this c4, d4 with knight coming to d5 so quickly, maybe we will be in time to take on e6 and push for d5 ourselves. But this is in this position is not the case, definitely. So now d4 is pushed, we are taking, knight takes, trade happens. If bishop takes on d4, we go for e5. We're getting a nice pawn structure and pushing for the d5 in the center, getting central pawns. If queen takes on d4, c6, now we're also again ready to go for e5 or d5 and yeah, just break with the center with our nice pawns. And again, we don't really have problems in this position. We're entering again the same variation of the Spanish for knights. Now, if white goes a3, starting with this move, we're most likely going to transpose to the d3 line because after knight d4, bishop c4, c6, d3 is played, and after castle, we are kind of transposing now. So here, d3 is played, castle. If white goes for g4, it's actually very important to remember. Now white hasn't castled yet, so wants to create attack against our king. We have to react very energetically. We go for knight d4, attacking the bishop and okay, offering a trade. And also putting pressure on f3, which is important in some lines. So white goes g5. We go back with a knight to e8, and there is actually no issues because our pawns are very good and solid. So bishop c4 coming back, now creating some pressure. But here after c6, we are already ready to move the bishop away to c7 and go for d5. This is another setup which we can have in this position. When we go for knight d4, we go c6, bishop c7, and push for the d5. And white is coming nowhere with this attack, while we will be able to open up the center where white's king is actually located. a3 is like a waiting move and also creating idea of bishop to hide on the a2 square. Here we go knight d4, bishop c4 and c6. So now again we can go for more ambitious approach, remove the bishop to c5 or c7 and push for d5. In case of bishop g5 here, we are always trying to ask a question to the bishop, where does it want to go, so that we always have the g5 opportunity later in the game. Now knight takes on f3. The point is that if pawn takes on f3, which would open the g file and feels like a little bit logical, we have bishop e7. And after breaking the pin, we are already fully ready to go for the d5. So rook g1, of course, we first remove the king. And yeah, basically we can go for ideas of the knight h5 and knight h7 to trade the bishops if we want to. And otherwise, we can also create an attacking ideas against the queen side if white is castling long. Queen f3, attacking our bishop, our knight on f6. So we of course play bishop e7, trying to solve this problem on f6. And yeah, just now as there is no problem, we're going to continue with d6 and bishop e6 in the next moves. In case of knight takes d4, we take with a pawn, knight e2 and bishop c7. Now we basically keep the bishop on this diagonal and ready to go for the d5. We're sacrificing a pawn, so if white is taking on d4, we go for d5, immediately breaking the center and attacking the bishop on c4. Pawn takes, and we have bishop g4 intermediate move challenging the queen and trying to challenge the king, since after f3 we have rook e8 attacking the king and trying to keep it in the center. Knight e2, and after cd, we're also attacking the bishop on c4, while white is attacking our bishop on g4. Bishop goes to b5 with the attack, but now our bishop goes back and defends everything. And after bishop trades, castle, d4, we're having more space in the position. And even though the position is I would say around equal, since we have a compensation for the pawn, due to this space in the center and potential weakness on e3 and ideas of pushing the pawn on the h file, bringing the pieces, attacking the pawn on the c2 square. We definitely have chances in this endgame. So now, again, we have this position. So d3 is the main move, castle. And now bishop g5 immediately. Very logical move. So as always, we challenge the bishop on g5 with h6. Bishop goes to h4. And now we go for bishop e7, just trying to break the pin. And the point here is we are leaving e5 unprotected and offering white to take it. If white is not taken, then we are going for d6. h3 and knight h7. We are ready to trade the bishops, and later we want to trade the knight on f3 so that we can win the fight over the d4 square. Bishop e7, knight e7, and now d4 is played. White is trying to immediately go for it. We go knight g6, and the next move we're going to play knight g5, targeting the knight on f3, and again we're getting a pretty even position. So what happens if white is taking the pawn? Bishop c6, bc, and knight e5. Well, here we go for knight e4, and the problem is that bishop on h4 is under attack. Bishop takes, queen takes. Now knight is under attack on e5. So if pawn takes on e4, we're taking with a queen, castle, rook b8, and we're just going to play for d6, f5, targeting the pawn on e4, and just creating attack against the white center. If knight takes on c6, which is very strong move, here we take on c6. If queen e7, trying to pin our queen, then we go for bishop h3. Very nice move, since after pawn takes on e4, we have queen b4, threatening to take on b2, and basically getting into this interesting endgame where white's king position is pretty bad, and for that reason we are already clearly better. And in case queen takes, we are playing queen f6. Now we are threatening to go with rook to e8 and winning the queen. So that's not really so good for white. So that's why d e4 has to be played. Now bishop a6, we're stopping white from castling. Queen d4, we're bringing the rook out, so stopping white to long side castle. Queen e3 now, and f5. We're just breaking the position of the white. White cannot castle again, neither long nor short, and we're breaking the central position of white with all the active pieces. We're definitely having at least an advantage in this, at least a compensation, sorry, in this endgame. And that was it actually for the quick starter. Thank you so much for studying together with me, and I'm going to see you in the next chapter.